Louisiana classrooms, the Ten Commandments, the First Amendment. We'll look at all of that for just a few moments today. The governor of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, just signed into law that the Ten Commandments must be placed in all public school classrooms in the great state of Louisiana. I'm just sorry that the state of Texas didn't take the lead in that. I'm just sorry that the state of Oklahoma didn't take the lead in that. Both of those states are seemingly the conservative states, the most conservative states, but it is Louisiana that's taking a leadership role, and the governor, Jeff Landry, in posting the Ten Commandments in the school classrooms. Now, as you might imagine, the left is absolutely going crazy over it. So we'll look at a little bit of what some of the leftists are saying, and we'll look at the Constitution, because most people, and everybody on the left, most people absolutely misunderstand the Constitution. They disregard the First Amendment. They disregard the meaning of the First Amendment, and they actually seemingly have very little knowledge of what it means. Even in conservative news channels, they seem to have very little knowledge about what the original intent of the First Amendment involves and what it is. And as we've noted many times before, if you don't have the original intent, you don't have anything at all. So let's think about, first of all, some of the reactions to the governor, Jeff Landry, signing into law, having these Ten Commandments posted in Louisiana classrooms. First of all is Leslie Marshall. Leslie Marshall's a liberal. She's on Fox News so frequently. I think she's in California, but she's a Democratic strategist, a Fox News contributor, and she questioned the priorities of Louisiana politicians a day after the governor signed a law requiring the public schools to display the Ten Commandments. Now, Jeff Landry, the Republican governor of Louisiana, says, "I can't wait to be sued." And the new law is already being challenged by the ACLU and Freedom from Religion Foundation, other organizations that want to keep the Bible out of classrooms and so forth. So let's go to Leslie Marshall for just a moment. Leslie Marshall made the comment on Fox News. I listened to her the other day. She said, Louisiana's 49th in education. We have 50 states. They're number one from being the bottom on education. Louisiana has one of the highest teen pregnancy rates. She said, number 3, the school lunch programs. Are we feeding the children? And so she said, as a former Christian, one of the things that I would like to see, the Jesus that I know in the Bible, I think he would care more if we really cared about the children. Now, I think this is so interesting because she sets it up as a either-or proposition. You either can publish the Ten Commandments in the classrooms, or you can care about the children. You can publish the Ten Commandments in the classroom, or you can feed the children in the classroom. You can publish the Ten Commandments in the classroom, or you can educate the children. That is absolutely bereft of any kind of reasoning. Can we not, Leslie Marshall, do both? Can it not be the case that we can increase the educational prowess of the children in Louisiana at the same time as posting the Ten Commandments? And by the way, is there any connection between moral integrity and people following the Ten Commandments of the Bible and being personally responsible for education and the children being responsible? Is there any connection whatsoever between the behavior of the children and the educational learning that they're receiving in schools? Leslie Marshall, this is exactly why liberalism has no taste for me whatsoever, because you just desire to keep out biblical precepts and act as if there's an either-or proposition. That is absolutely absurd on the face of it. We can do both. Not saying that we're just accepting 49th in education, but here's something else interesting to note. I thought, now, where is that? I wonder what figures or where she received the figures, and I just noted, at least from a Fox News article, that it's from the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And it says, according to them, that Louisiana ranks 42nd in education, 49th in children's economic well-being and in children's health. And the ranking from the U.S. News and World Report puts Louisiana 47th in education. I thought that was interesting because here's the Annie E. Casey Foundation. I want to give you just a background of that one. I know Leslie Marshall wasn't familiar with this, but nevertheless, The Annie E. Casey Foundation, founded by former SDS member, that is, Students for Democratic Society, a pro-communist organization. The leader of it, or one of the members of it in the 60s, was Bart Lubau. He was the one who founded the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And the Annie E. Casey Foundation is about racial quotas in juvenile detention facilities. They're not interested in the well-being of kids and the well-being of the classroom. The Annie E. Casey Foundation is a political, hard-left, communist-oriented organization. I wouldn't pay any attention to them. Now, that's not to say that Louisiana is higher on the ladder than Annie E. Casey Foundation makes them to be, but I thought it was interesting that even Fox News quotes Annie E. Casey Foundation as a source, a pro-communist source. Absolutely amazing. Now let's go to the Hill for just a moment. On the Hill, that would be the news outlet called the Hill. It has this byline: Trump on the new Louisiana law, and Trump says, "I love the Ten Commandments." So here's something else I find interesting about all of this, and that is the leftists, and we'll see it from the USA Today also. The leftists are all about criticizing, using it as a critical tool to beat President Trump or former President Trump. They use it as a crowbar, that is, the Ten Commandments. So Trump came out on Truth Social and supported the Ten Commandments being posted in Louisiana classrooms. And incidentally, all of these, every classroom, the posting of it would be by private donation. That doesn't matter to these people. They don't want it. Trump wants it, and the left, they use that simply to criticize Trump. I think, isn't that amazing? We'll come back to that in just a few moments. But here's from the Hill, for example. Count former President Trump among those who are backing Louisiana's controversial and first-in-the-nation law that will mandate classrooms from elementary school through college prominently to display the Ten Commandments. Let me stop here and make a correction. This is not first in the nation. This is first in the nation since secularism crushed the First Amendment in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And when we got rid of the Ten Commandments, when we got rid of the Bible reading, when we got rid of prayer, people don't realize that. They say first in the nation. No, this was commonplace in the nation from the founding of the country until the 1940s. As a matter of fact, I have, and many of you probably have also, a copy of the Dallas Public Schools lessons on the Bible, and they have Gospel of John. What I find interesting is that in the public school system, they taught, for example, biblical books such as the Gospel of John or whatever book it may be, and the lessons as you read through them are more difficult, they're more challenging than even our Bible classes in churches today. What does that say? It tells us very plainly that what we were from the founding until the period of FDR at least, and even probably Woodrow Wilson period actually, from the founding until the time of the progressive era, we were a Christian nation, and no one even questioned whether the Ten Commandments could be posted in a classroom and everywhere in public at all. And so the Hill makes a major blunder here, saying it's the first in the nation. No, it's the first in the nation since the takeover by the progressive, liberal, socialistic left that kicked out the Ten Commandments in the 1960s. Well, going on with the article, it says, this is quoting President Trump on Truth Social. "I love the Ten Commandments in public schools, private schools, and many other places for that matter." And then it's this: how can we as a nation go wrong? This may be, in fact, the first major step in the revival of religion, which is desperately needed in our country. Bring back the Ten Commandments, Trump added. Now, the White House, the Department of Education, did not respond to the Hill's request, it tells us, for comment on Louisiana's new law or on Trump's remark. At least by the time that I'm going here to air, I haven't heard anything from President Biden. He's locked in this battle with Trump. Coming up, the debate is next week. He has not publicly addressed the issue. Now, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry a Republican in a deeply religious and conservative state, and I would say it's a bold, courageous state, more courageous than Texas, unfortunately, more courageous than Oklahoma, unfortunately. He signed House Bill 71 into law Wednesday after it had sailed through, according to The Hill, the state's GOP-controlled legislature. Of course, critics who are really unknowing and ignorant about the First Amendment, absolutely ignorant, the ACLU and Freedom from Religion Foundation vowed to fight the law that they see as blatantly unconstitutional. Unfortunately for the ACLU and the Freedom from Religion Foundation, they don't know. They don't know the First Amendment at all. They don't know what the founders intended by it, which we'll talk about before we leave today. They don't know. They're absolutely in ignorance, and they hope that you remain in ignorance also. The Biden administration did not immediately respond to the Hill's request, it tells us, for comment on the official position about the Louisiana law. Now, the president, it tells us, is a devout Catholic who regularly celebrates Mass with his family. Well, let me put a caveat on that. When they give it to him, went to one state, I've forgotten whether it was Virginia or North Carolina, when he was campaigning for the presidency last election cycle, they refused to give him the Mass because they said he was so unfaithful to the Catholic doctrine, and that is pro-abortion specifically, pro-homosexual, number 2. Well, opponents of the legislation have vowed to take the matter to courts. And here's their statement. This is the ACLU chapter in Louisiana. Quote, politicians have no business imposing their preferred religious doctrine on students and families in public schools. And they said that in a statement that was actually a joint statement by the ACLU and Louisiana chapter, as well as the Americans United for Separation of Church and State and Freedom from Religion Foundation. As mentioned, they don't know anything about the First Amendment, apparently. They know very little about the founding of this nation and what the founders actually said on the subject, which we're going to get to in just a few moments. But before we do that, I want to notice another article. I told you the left is absolutely going crazy on it. The USA Today article. This is from Rex Hupkel, I guess is his name. And he says, I thought, this is so choice. The 10 Commandments in Louisiana schools is fine as long as they note the ones Trump broke. And he suggests that they post the 10 Commandments and put a sign up there saying, here are the ones that President Trump broke. Well, you know what, Mr. Rex? You tell me which president hasn't broken the 10 Commandments. It's not President Trump. I'm not defending the fact that he violated God's law, but it is so interesting that all the way back from Woodrow Wilson on, they have flagrantly run over the Bible with hobnail boots, including President Kennedy, President Johnson, Bill Clinton, and everybody. And yet they want to say, well, we want to put the ones Trump broke. You know, I'll tell you what, I'll go for it. Put them up. Put them up there. That will give us an opportunity to say, okay, you know what? Put it up there, the ones that Trump broke. And when I get to the classroom, I'm going to talk about the ones that all of the presidents broke and how they have violated God's law. That's great, Rex. Let's do that. So here's his article. Louisiana's governor signed a law requiring poster-sized display of the 10 Commandments in every public school classroom in the state. And he said, I'm completely fine with it as long as those posters say, in large font along the top, the 10 Commandments, most of which Donald Trump has violated. So I'll say this, put it up there. Put it up there, Rex. You go ahead. And we'll put up in the state of Texas, and we'll put up in the state of Arizona, where I'm from, Oklahoma. Here are the ones that Bill Clinton violated. Here are the ones that Lyndon Johnson violated. Here are the ones that Barack Obama violated. How about his membership in homosexual clubs? How about that one? Yeah, let's put them all up there. Yeah. He says, well, that seems fair, and I would be comfortable with students of any age walking into a classroom and receiving a daily lesson on the meaning of hypocrisy. You bet. You bet. Hypocrisy also comes in the fact that you want to single out one single man as the only violator of the Ten Commandments. That is so ridiculous. It's stupidity. The Republicans, he says, who pushed for this law, which makes Louisiana the only state to mandate Ten Commandments posters in schools, seem laser focused on history and accuracy. They describe the commandments as a historical document. After signing the legislation, Governor Jeff Landry said, if you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses. I wonder if he was correct in that. Oh, yeah, he was. As a matter of fact, that's how our country was founded. Isn't that right, Rex? I think if I'm not mistaken, on the Supreme Court building, they have Moses holding the Ten Commandments, the original lawgiver, God giving the law to Moses. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think Jeff Landry's got something there, Rex. Maybe you better look into that one. But he goes on to write, okie dokie, let's go with that. Because respecting the rule of law matters. And if we're respecting the rule of law, I'm sure Governor Landry would agree that it would be educational malfeasance not to inform Louisiana students that the presumptive Republican presidential nominee and former president, a man Landry himself has enthusiastically endorsed, has broken a slew of the laws outlined on the classroom poster. No one's going to disagree with you, Rex. But you know what? What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. Let's put Barack Obama up there also. Pushing homosexuality in our nation. How about that one? That's a violation of adultery. Ten Commandments right there. Matter of fact, in the Old Testament, those who sponsored it were stoned to death, just as were adulterers. Yeah, you want to put that one up there too? Yeah, you put Trump up there. Let's put Barack Obama up there. Let's put Lyndon Johnson up there, who's a notorious liar and a cheater. Got into the Senate, by the way, from cheating in elections. We've been over that before. Let's put President Kennedy up there as a notorious adulterer, having four different women in the White House. Not just something in his past, not just something in his college past or something in his business past, but something that was going on while he was president. You want to do that? So here's how Rex writes it. The law requires the Ten Commandment posters to be at least 11 inches by 14 inches wide, that the text of the Ten Commandments shall be the central focus of the poster or framed document and be printed in large, easily readable font. And again, he writes, this is all completely fine with me as long as there are notes on the poster or on an accompanying poster that detail the ways Trump violated certain commandments. Now, Mr. Hupke, why are you so laser focused on Trump only? No one denies that Trump has violated the Ten Commandments. No one denies that. What do you got on the other side? You have a notorious Joe Biden liar. You have a notorious man who has sponsored homosexuality, who has sponsored transgenderism, who sponsored all of these things and more also, just following in the footsteps of Barack Obama. Why focus upon Trump only? Put them all on there. I say, yeah, let's do it. Do it. Now he says Trump had violent speech, violent rhetoric. He said that's a feature. For example, per the language mandated by the state of Louisiana, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. And he said Trump has previously dropped a GD in his rally speeches. That's right. Has Joe Biden spoken any time? Not just dropping God's name in vain, just here and there. Has he spoken any time where he does not take the Lord's name in vain? I don't think so. Yeah, put Joe Biden up there too. Just put all of the presidents who violate these things. That's right. After the then president dropped a couple of GD bombs in 2019, Trump supporter and evangelical advisor Robert Jeffress of Texas told the Washington Post, I certainly don't condone taking the Lord's name in vain. Well, Robert Jeffress is exactly right on that one. Robert Jeffress is wrong on Baptist doctrine, but he's right on that one. So Trump is not, and here's something else he puts in here. Trump isn't the poster boy for church going or adultery avoiding. No, he's not. I'll tell you what, though. At least he acknowledges that there are 10 commandments given by God that we ought to accede to, that we ought to obey, and the children ought to see. But when you go with the Joe Bidens of the world, they don't want them to see that. They don't want anyone in the schools to have anything to do with biblical learning or 10 commandments at all. At least Trump wants that. So, Rex, what do you think about that? Well, we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the First Amendment. The sad thing is, Rex, the writer here of USA Today, Hupke, Leslie Marshall, even many conservatives people on the other side of the spectrum, conservative, they don't understand the First Amendment. The ACLU absolutely does not. The Freedom from Religion Foundation does not. And other organizations, all of them suing the state of Louisiana, they don't really have an inkling about what the First Amendment is about and the founding of our nation. We'll talk about that when we come back. Louisiana classrooms, the 10 Commandments, and the First Amendment. That's what we're talking about today. The first segment, we talked about how the left has gone absolutely crazy. Let them. They don't know what they're talking about. Let's talk about the church and state, First Amendment, what the founders intended by the First Amendment, what they said themselves regarding church and state. So let's think about that as we proceed along the way here today. So when our founding fathers referred to this nation, they referred to it as yes, that's right, a Christian nation. John Jay, one of the authors of the Federalist Papers, said it's a Christian nation. He said he did not intend for it to be understood in any sense that an official church had been established, but rather that the principles upon which a republic rests are Christian in origin. And here's how he put it. Christianity is the principle, the all-pervading element, the deepest and most solid foundation of all of our civil institutions. He goes on to say, it is the religion of the people, the national religion, but we don't have an established church or an established religion. Now notice what John Jay had to say. Our nation, he says, is a Christian nation because Christianity is the principle, the founding principle. He even says we have a national religion, that is Christianity, but we don't have an established church. You know, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, as well as the ACLU, they probably losing their minds right now because they have no concept about what in the world John Jay might have in mind here. How can you possibly have a Christian nation but not an established church? They don't get it. They don't understand. And I've collected articles over the year, probably just a slew of them. And I see so many of them, they just rail against the Christian nation idea. They think because we don't have an established church. They don't understand. They have little understanding, really zero understanding about what this is all about. But that's how John Jay put it. He, of course, was one of the authors of the Federalist Papers, as we noted before. He said it's the religion of the people, the national religion, Christianity. Now, some of them, the founders, referred to this as a Christian republic. They utilize symbols such as Moses crossing the Red Sea, or Moses above the Supreme Court holding tablets of stone, the state papers on which the Continental Congress wrote, those state papers of the Continental Congress filled with Christian ideas, the republic they considered to be, they said, an outgrowth of Christianity. An outgrowth, that is, freedom is an outgrowth of Christianity. Founders talked that way all the time. The very concept of a covenant idea of the government with the people is a Christian concept. That is a biblical concept, to put it more succinctly. A contract, that is, the people and the government. The people and the government agreeing, here's what we're going to do. Where did that come from? The Bible. John Eidsmoe, in his book about Christianity and the Constitution, writes this, quoting Roger Sherman. He said, his faith in the new republic was largely because he felt it was founded on Christianity as he understood it. Roger Sherman, one of the original signers The Constitution said, I support the Republic because it's founded upon Christianity as I understand it. You know, the ACLU, I'm sure they're pulling their hair out when they hear this kind of stuff. They don't understand anything at all. How about Joseph Story? Joseph Story on the Supreme Court. He was a Universalist, by the way, but he said this. Boy, this is powerful. He said, probably at the time of the adoption of the Constitution and of the amendment to it now under consideration, and he was talking about the first, the general, if not the universal sentiment was that Christianity ought to receive encouragement from the state so far as it was not incompatible with the private rights of conscience and freedom of religious worship. That is, encouragement by the state, but the state is not going to force people to go to church, force people to worship, but Christianity ought to receive encouragement from the state. Continuing, quote, an attempt to level all religions and to make it a matter of state policy to hold all in utter indifference would have created universal disapprobation, if not universal indignation. That's exactly where we are. Even on Fox News, I heard, the people who support one man, I don't remember his name, who's on Harris Faulkner. Harris Faulkner does such a fabulous job on her show. I've gotten to where I appreciate her as much as anyone midday. But, she had a gentleman on the other day, and he said, well, we're going to support the Louisiana law from the historical perspective because it's a matter of history. And so if we support it from history, we'll be able to get it in. Doesn't sound like the founders at all, does it? No. How did the founders support it, by the way? Did the founders support Christianity and want the state to support Christianity and want the Bible be taught in schools? Did they want it to be supported that way and taught that way because it's a matter of history in America? No. No, because they knew that it was fundamental to the governing of a nation. And he said anyone to level all religions would have received universal disapprobation and indignation. That is to say, well, people come along and say, well, what about the Muslims? What about the Hindus? What about the Sikhs? What about these? You want to hold everybody the same level? Universal indignation. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit when we get to it. Now, in the New Hampshire Confession of Faith, which is the organizing instrument of the Baptist Church and edited by Edward Hiscox, they say, baptism was, in the first century church, that door into the church. But now it is different. You see, the Baptist Church says, well, that's the way it was then in the first century, but now it's different. That's Edward Hiscox. I think it's about page 49 or so. I thought, wow, here's the Baptist Church telling us that baptism was a door into the church, but now it is different. We don't think it has a right to be and should be. The reason I mention all of that is because in the first founding of our country, Christianity was the foundational stone of it, and it was a Christian nation, but now it is different, in the words of Edward Hiscox. So the eye of this storm is the First Amendment, and here it is. The Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So we have Congress shall make no law establishing religion, respecting the establishment clause, and number 2, prohibiting the free exercise, the free exercise clause. 2 clauses, establishment, free exercise clause of the First Amendment. But now today, we are 180 degrees off, and we're going in the other direction. This amendment, note carefully, was written to limit Congress. All of the amendments were written to limit Congress. That is, put a lock and key on federal government. That's what the First Amendment, all 10 amendments, were designed to do, put a lock and key on the federal government. As a matter of fact, Thomas Jefferson said the key to it all was the 10th Amendment, which says, if we didn't give, that is, through the instrument of the Constitution, if the states did not give to the federal government a right to do such and such, it has not that right to do it. Well, we've long since thrown that out the window today because we have a socialistic government, a totalitarian government right now on hand, led by Joe Biden, crashing our country to open borders among and inflation and on it goes. But Congress was to be limited. And it was so written, that First Amendment was so written that people could have full protection of the rights to free and unrestricted worship. But today, the First Amendment is used by liberals, secular humanists to say somehow the government and the free marketplace of ideas should be protected from religion. That has nothing to do with the First Amendment. It is not that we have to protect people from religion. The federal government has no business in that. That's the First Amendment is to restrict the federal government from inserting itself into any other thing. Number two, notice this. The Supreme Court left "under God" phrase in the Pledge of Allegiance in 1963. Justice William Brennan wrote that it could be kept in the pledge only because the words no longer have a religious purpose or meaning, but merely recognizes the historical fact that our nation was believed to have been founded under God. In other words, it's a historical curiosity, has no relevance to us today at all. It really means nothing. And that's exactly where we are with the First Amendment. That's a historical curiosity, according to many people. But of course, if that's the case, we don't have a First Amendment. Number three, the dangers of the subject of religion in our school curriculum has been so great, according to the irreligious people, that they would abolish all mention of God, all religion from public schools, the complete elimination from religion from the curriculum of a school that's seeking to teach moral values. That amounts to an establishment of secular humanism. If you're going to eliminate Christianity, the Ten Commandments, we already have evolution, the false doctrine, the false philosophy, because evolution, the general theory of evolution, is a philosophy. We're going to have that in public schools, and we do have that in public schools. So when we come back, we'll talk about the Constitution, the original intent, and what that First Amendment does indeed mean. We'll be back in just a moment. We're talking about Louisiana classrooms, the Ten Commandments, and the First Amendment. I want to say a word about the original intent of the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson, probably the man I most admire, said that original intent is the only legitimate interpretation of the Constitution. Here's his direct quote: "On every question of construction, carry ourselves back to the time when the Constitution was adopted. Recollect the spirit manifested in the debates, and instead of trying to the meaning, what meaning may be squeezed out of the text or invented against it, conform to the probable one in which it was passed." Are we seeing that today? The ACLU is going to come up with a meaning that is against the original intent of the Constitution. The Freedom from Religion Foundation, they also are against the idea of the original intent of the Constitution. Therefore, we don't even have a Constitution, really, according to them. James Madison, he says, "I entirely concur in the propriety of resorting to the sense in which the Constitution was accepted and ratified by the nation. In that sense alone, it is the legitimate Constitution." Then he goes on to say, "What a metamorphosis would be produced in the code of law if all of its ancient phraseology were to be taken in the modern sense." That's right. What a metamorphosis has occurred. James Wilson. James Wilson was just a great founding father, a teacher of Thomas Jefferson, there at the College of William and Mary, teaching of law. Matter of fact, he was such a scholar. They said that he absolutely knew all of history, what governments worked in history and what did not work, and all of that. He was able to tell that. But he said this: "The first and governing maxim in the interpretation of a statute is to discover the meaning of those who made it. That's the first goal. What I say that regarding Bible study as well. What is the goal? To determine what is the original intent of what Paul wrote, what Peter wrote, what the apostles wrote. Not what's meaning I can squeeze out of it. That's taking a text out of context. That's applying it to my own whims, my own hobbies. No, I want to know exactly what they meant and what was their intention. But here's probably the best one. Justice Clarence Thomas, he said, if we're not interested in original intent, the Constitution is no more value to us than the latest football scores. That's right. So the Freedom from Religion Foundation, as well as the ACLU, they don't even care about the Constitution at all. They're simply trying to bushwhack the Americans, blind the Americans about what the Constitution means. So let's look at the background of the First Amendment for just a moment. In the reign of Charles II, Parliament, for the purpose of compelling all persons to attend an established church, passed what was called, in 1665, this is the Conventicle Act. It said everyone over the years of 16 years of age who attended a conventicular, that is a religious meeting in which 5 persons were present, besides the household, that is a conventicle, every person 16 years or older that did not attend was subject to imprisonment, to transportation beyond the seas for the third offense. During the same reign, it passed the Test Act after the Conventicle Act, the Test Act requiring oaths in support of the established religion. Now, if we just reach back into history for a moment, let's go back, for example, to the ancient Roman Empire. And why were the Romans so, why did they persecute Christians so much? Well, one reason was because they wanted Christians to pledge allegiance to the false gods that they worshiped. And when Christians refused to do it, they put them to death frequently. Now, that happened upon many occasions. In the reign of Marcus Aurelius, for example, was one particularly horrific persecution against Christians, and that's the way they tested them. They wanted them to pledge allegiance to the false gods, and they wanted them to burn incense to them. But here we have the Catholic Church and then the Church of England doing exactly the same thing, saying, this is the established church, and you must pay respects, attend services, tell us that you believe the doctrines of the Catholic Church or the Church of England. That is not freedom of conscience. That's not freedom at all. That's what they were doing in England. So they had the Test Act. So under those acts, which were not repealed until recent times, all nonconformists of whatever religious belief were very severely dealt with. And those acts hastened the immigration to America. That's why they came over here. Unfortunately, the established Church of England had already been set up in several of the colonies, and taxes were levied for its support. So out of your public taxes, you would pay money that supported the pulpit of the Church of England. That would be the Anglican Church. You paid money to support the pulpit and the doctrines. You didn't believe it? Doesn't matter. You paid taxes to it. How would you like, see, I preach in the churches of Christ. How would you like that we would have a law in the United States saying the tax money that you receive is going to support Bill Lockwood in the pulpit of the churches of Christ? Obviously, that would be a flagrant violation of your rights. What we do is we ask for free will contributions. You can or you cannot. What if the Baptist church was the established church in America and said, okay, from Congress they said all tax money, a portion of it is going to be given to supporting Baptist pulpits? I would object, and you would object. Even the Baptists would object. Why is that the case? Because that would be an established church. That's why. That's what was going on in America. And they had an established Church of England set up already in several colonies. So Madison and Jefferson waged war. Did they wage war against having "in God we trust" on coins? No. Did they wage war against having Moses on the Supreme Court building? No. Did they wage war against having the 10 Commandments in schools? No. Did they wage war against preachers preaching in public square? No. Did they wage war against having a Christian nation? No. But they did wage war. They did wage war against having a state-sponsored church In Virginia, they had a state-sponsored church. And these men, Jefferson and Madison, finally secured passage of a law declaring any interference by the civil authority with religious opinion is against natural rights. Now, that's what was going on. So the First Amendment, that brings us right to the Constitution. The Constitution tells us, remember, we have the Establishment Clause, the Free Exercise Clause. That is, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. What does it forbid? The federal government from having anything to do with establishing a religion. Or number two, the free exercise, or prohibiting the free exercise. Congress is forbidden. Then we also have Article 6, Section 3, no religious test shall be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. So, notice two blatant errors that the ACLU needs to learn, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation, they don't want to learn. Number one, the First Amendment forbids only the federal government from doing it. Has nothing to do with the state of Louisiana. If the state of Louisiana wants to have something that an established church, they may. As a matter of fact, when the Constitution was passed, there was already an established church in several of the states. They didn't want a national denomination. The federal government is to stay out of it. It left the states free. Is Louisiana free? Yes, it is. Is Texas free? Yes, it is. Are they emboldened enough to do the same as Louisiana? We'll see. I doubt it, but we'll see. Number two, the establishment of religion refers to a national denomination in the sense of a state church supported by tax money. The term establishment of religion was to prevent a national church. Was it to prevent in God we trust? No. Was it to prevent people praying in public? No. Was it to prevent praying in schools? No. Was it to prevent Bible being taught in schools? No. It was designed to forbid a national denomination. Leslie Marshall needs to learn this. This is exactly where the libs are so far off, and so many conservatives are also. Article 6, Section 3, about no religious test, does not refer to whether one believes in God or not, but whether you belong to a particular denomination or not. That is, we're going to say only those who are Catholics can be in the Congress. No, that you can't have that. Or only those who are Baptist belong in the Congress. No, that's what that means. Now, how do we know that's the case? Remember the two errors here. It only forbids, the First Amendment only forbids the federal government. Number two, establishment of religion refers to national denomination. The federal government forbidden to establish a national denomination. That's the meaning of the First Amendment. Now, how do we know? Well, let's look back. George Mason, the father of the Bill of Rights, the man who is behind it all, not the only one to speak on it, says this: all men have an equal, natural, unalienable right to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of his conscience, and that no particular sect or society of Christians, that'd be a particular church, ought to be favored or established by law in preference to others. George Mason telling us the original intent of the Constitution is that no one church, the Church of England, no, not the Church of the Roman Catholic Church, not the Baptist Church, not the Congregational Church, none of them ought to be favored by establishment of law. That's George Mason's comment on it. He's commenting on the First Amendment. How did James Madison comment on it? He said, well, quote, the civil rights of none shall be abridged on account of religious belief or worship, nor shall any national religion be established. He's commenting on the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. He's saying it means no national denomination, no national religion. In the Annals of Congress from 1789 to June 8th, 1789, September 25, 1789, we have the following. In August 15th of that year, 1789 now, the Annals of Congress. Mr. Peter Sylvester of New York had some doubts. He feared that the First Amendment, might be thought to have a tendency to abolish religion altogether. Well, Mr. Peter Sylvester, you're onto something there, because that's exactly where we are today. Mr. Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts said it would be better, therefore, if it was that no religious doctrine shall be established by law, because they were not trying to excise Christianity out of the religious founding of this nation. They didn't want to establish a national denomination, so he said, let's read it this way: no religious doctrine shall be established by law. James Madison of Virginia said that he apprehended the meaning of the words that Congress should not do this would settle the issue. That is, it's a forbidding of Congress. But Fisher Ames was the founding father who offered the final wording of the First Amendment. And it is clear from his writing that religion, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, means single Christian denomination. The original version proposed in Senate September 3rd, 1789 stated, Congress shall not make any law establishing any religious denomination. That's right. The second version reads, Congress shall make no law establishing any particular denomination. The third version reads, Congress shall make no law establishing any particular denomination in preference to others. You'll notice that the word religion is interchangeable with the word denomination. That's what they intended. No national denomination. That's how our founders said it. Now let's look at the comments that the founders said, some of them on the First Amendment, just to show you that this is exactly what we have. The founders on the fact that it only forbade the federal government from establishing a national denomination that was tax supported. So Thomas Jefferson said in his second inaugural address in 1805, in matters of religion, I've considered its free exercise is placed by the Constitution independent of the powers of the general government. I have therefore undertaken on no occasion to prescribe the religious exercises suited to it, but have left all of them, as the Constitution found them, under the direction and discipline of the state or church authorities acknowledged by several religious societies. In other words, we're leaving all of those questions to the states and to the authorities there, and Congress is not going to be inserting itself into this argument. Jefferson said on further, quote, I consider the government of the United States, that is the federal government, as interdicted by the Constitution from intermeddling with religious institutions, their doctrines, their discipline, or exercises. This results not only from the provision that no law shall be made respecting the establishment or free exercise of religion, First Amendment, but from that also it reserves to the states the powers not delegated to the United States, that's the 10th Amendment. Certainly, no power to prescribe any religious exercise or to assume authority in any religious discipline has been delegated to the general government. It must then rest with the states. How do you like that? Jefferson, third president of the United States, said, you know what? Leave it to the states. Federal government, no say-so in it. Justice Story, son of one of the Indians at the Boston Tea Party, founder of Harvard Law School, called the foremost of American legal writers, nominated to the Supreme Court by James Madison, said this, the power, or the whole power, over the subject of religion is left exclusively to state governments to be acted upon according to their own sense of justice and the state constitutions. Now, let's just take an aside for just a moment. How about education? Education is to be left to the states also. But what happened? Well, we have for many decades now, the federal government taking over taking over the education and inserting itself into the classroom. So, in answer to Leslie Marshall, the liberal commentator, you know what? How to get Louisiana off the bottom? Let Louisiana take care of its own education. Federal government, get your noses out of it. But no, that's not what happens. The federal government inserts itself into every single state, and we are racing to the bottom in all the states. That's what's happening. The federal government needs to stay out of it. Back to the First Amendment, James Madison said this: during the Virginia Ratifying Convention, there is not a shadow of right in the general government to intermeddle with religion. Its least interference would be the most flagrant usurpation. The plain fact of the matter is that the First Amendment tells us not that we can't have Christianity in the public square, not that we can't read the Bible in public schools, not that we can't pray in public schools, and certainly not that Louisiana can't have the Ten Commandments in the public school classroom. The First Amendment is only about, let's not establish a national denomination supported by tax monies to the federal government. The federal government stays out. So Freedom from Religion Foundation, ACLU, I know that you hope that people don't go back and learn what the founders intended by the First Amendment, but that's what they intended. That's what we need to go back to.